The man who ran the Pima County Sheriff's Department before Chris Nanos went on national television and said something that every person following this case needs to hear. He said once a crime scene has been corrupted, that is the end of it. You cannot reconstitute it. It is gone. Forever. That man is Dr. Richard Carmona, the 17th Surgeon General of the United States. A man who spent 3 decades with the Pima County Sheriff's Department and knows exactly how a crime scene in that jurisdiction is supposed to be handled. He is not a YouTuber. He is not an online analyst. He ran this department. He knows the protocols. And he went on camera and said the crime scene in the Nancy Guthrie case has been permanently corrupted. Day 69. No arrest, no named suspect. And the glove DNA, the lead everyone was watching, came back to a local restaurant worker with zero connection to this case. That thread is closed, and the man who replaced Carmona at the top of this department told a local television station that criticism of how the crime scene was handled is, his exact word, silly. What this video is going to show you is exactly what is left of this investigation after 69 days. What evidence still exists? What has already been lost? And the question that a former United States Surgeon General just made impossible to ignore. Now, before we go a single second later, I want you to put down whatever within your hands and drop a prayer of faith for Nancy Guthrie not later right now. Because we serve a God. We seize every unanswered question in this investigation, and this family has been carrying this weight for over 60 days without a single peaceful night. Father, we leave Nancy before you tonight. We ask you to guide this investigation to bring hidden things into the light, to return Nancy into the family that loves her. Keep every person watching safe, their children, their parents, their grandchildren. Type amen in the comment if you're still standing with Nancy tonight. Start with what Carmona actually said because his exact words matter. He told News Nation that the thing that alarmed him most, the thing he said perplexed all of us, was the moment Sheriff Nanos publicly announced on television that he personally had opened the crime scene at Nancy Guthrie's home. Carmona was direct. That is not something a sheriff does. It is the lead detective who makes the determination that all of the evidence has been photographed, bagged, tagged, and processed before any scene is released. A sheriff announcing the reopening of an active crime scene on television is not standard practice. It is a breach of the procedural separation that exists specifically to prevent command-level decisions from contaminating forensic-level work. Nanos then closed the scene again. A second sweep was ordered. And Carmona's assessment of that reversal was equally blunt. Once it has been corrupted, that is the end of it. You cannot reconstitute a crime scene. Those words came from a man who spent his career in this exact department, in this exact jurisdiction, knowing exactly what those protocols are and exactly what it means when they are not followed. And then Carmona described what was captured on video during the period the scene was open. A Domino's delivery car driving across Nancy Guthrie's front lawn, while an active investigation into the disappearance of an 84-year-old woman was supposedly underway at that address. Carmona laid out precisely why that matters in a courtroom. A defense attorney will say that crime scene was corrupted. You had people delivering pizzas. How do we know this is real evidence? And he is right. And every person who crossed that threshold during the window, the scene was open deposited biological material, skin cells, fibers, shoe impressions that mixed with whatever the suspect left behind. Every uncontrolled entry is ammunition for a defense attorney to challenge the integrity of every piece of physical evidence recovered from that property. Nanos's response to Carmona's comments and to the broader criticism of how the scene was handled was to appear on a local Tucson station and say, "I have no regrets about my team and their efforts. I don't regret we let the crime scene go too soon or any of that. That's just silly." The 17th Surgeon General of the United States calls it corrupted forever. The sheriff who made the decision calls criticism silly. That is where this investigation stands on day 69. The crime scene is the foundation. You either preserve it or you lose it. There is no middle option and there is no recovery. What Carmona confirmed on camera is that the foundation of the Nancy Guthrie investigation was compromised in the first 24 hours. And everything built on top of a compromised foundation carries that compromise forward into every courtroom, every evidence challenge, every moment when a defense attorney stands up and asks how we know anything from that scene is untainted. Now, to the glove. Because this development has not received the attention it deserves, and it changes the forensic picture of this case significantly. A black glove was recovered approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home in the early weeks of the investigation. It appeared visually consistent with the gloves worn by the suspect in the doorbell camera footage. It contained DNA from an unknown male. The entire true crime community has been watching that lead for weeks. It felt like the thread that could pull everything open. That lead is closed. The DNA from the glove has been traced to a local restaurant employee, someone with no connection to this case, no connection to the Guthrie family, no connection to the neighborhood, no connection to anything. That person has been eliminated. The glove goes nowhere. What remains is the mixed DNA profile recovered from inside Nancy's home. The sheriff described it as potentially containing material from several individuals, which makes isolating a single clean profile significantly harder. And investigators submitted some of that DNA to the national database and received no hits. The genetic genealogy process, the same methodology that identified the Golden State Killer, has been confirmed as active. But the only confirmed DNA thread left in this case is a mixed profile from inside a home whose crime scene was described by a former U.S. Surgeon General as permanently corrupted. That is the forensic reality of Day 69. The pacemaker timestamp remains the most forensically clean data point in this entire investigation. At 2:28 in the morning on February 1st, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker, a medical device that transmits cardiac data independently of any human account, dropped its connection entirely. That is the closest thing investigators have to a confirmed abduction timestamp. And a vehicle was captured on a Ring camera approximately 2.5 miles away at 2:36 in the morning, 6 minutes after the pacemaker went silent. Investigators have not been able to identify that vehicle. 2 clean data points, 1 timestamp, 1 unidentified car. That is what 69 days has produced from the physical surveillance record. Now the question that Carmona's comments have made impossible to dismiss. The question about how this investigation was shaped in the first hours before law enforcement ever arrived. The call came into the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 12:03 in the afternoon on February 1st. Deputies arrived at 12:15, but Annie and Cameron Guthrie had arrived at Nancy's home before that call was made. They were on the property, searching it, moving through it, observing it, for somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour before anyone dialed 911. Every investigator trained in crime scene protocol understands what that means regardless of who those people are. The family is not guilty. That has been settled publicly and officially. But the protocol exists specifically because innocent people contaminate crime scenes just as effectively as guilty ones. The protocol does not ask whether someone is innocent. It asks whether they moved through the space before trained forensic personnel could process it. In this case, they did, by nearly an hour. Savannah Guthrie confirmed publicly for the first time in her March interview what the family found when they arrived. The back doors of Nancy's home were propped open. There was blood on the front doorstep. The Ring camera had been physically yanked from the wall. The family processed all of that. They moved through rooms. They touched surfaces. They tried to understand what had happened. And when investigators arrived at 12:15, they were walking into a scene that had already been encountered, interpreted, and physically navigated by the people who reported the crime. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer analyzed what those propped back doors suggest, that perpetrators likely entered through the rear and left the doors open for operational purposes. But that analysis is based entirely on Savannah's public description of what her family found, because that is the only account of what those doors looked like that morning. The investigators who arrived did not observe them independently for the first time. They were told about them. And then there is the ransom theory, the framework that has shaped this entire investigation from the first hours. Savannah confirmed in her Today Show interview that her brother Cameron, before a single note had arrived, before investigators had characterized anything publicly, before Nanos held a single press conference, said on the first phone call that he believed their mother had been kidnapped for ransom. His exact words, according to Savannah, "I think she has been kidnapped for ransom." That framing was communicated to investigators from the moment they arrived. 2 days later, the first ransom note appeared. It contained specific non-public details about the interior of Nancy's home, the exact location of her Apple Watch, details about a floodlight that only someone who had been inside the property would know. And the FBI confirmed to TMZ that they believe the 2 original notes are real, but no agency has ever publicly confirmed whether those notes came from Nancy's actual captor or from someone with insider knowledge who was not directly involved in the abduction. What is confirmed is this: the family named the theory before the evidence arrived. The notes that arrived 2 days later reinforced the theory with insider details. The family publicly validated those notes on camera, saying they had received a message and would pay. And that framework, ransom kidnapping by an outside actor, has been the center of gravity for this investigation for 69 days. Multiple former FBI agents have characterized the complete absence of direct communication from a kidnapper, no confirmed channel, no proof of life. The ransom notes sent to media outlets rather than to the family directly, as highly unusual for a genuine ransom operation. Former FBI Special Agent Harry Trumbitas told Yahoo News that the ransom hypothesis looks less and less likely as time passes. There are too many ways people can get caught, and yet the framework persists. Not because the evidence demands it, because the family named it first and has continued to publicly affirm it since. This is not an accusation against the Guthrie family. It is a description of how dominant narrative frameworks shape investigations. Criminal justice research across multiple countries has documented that investigators who receive early framing about a case before they examine the physical evidence change their interpretation of that evidence to match the framing they received. And the family arrived first, named the theory first, became the loudest public voice, and the investigation has been operating inside that framework for 69 days without a formal independent review of whether the framework itself holds up. The institutional collapse around Nanos is not background noise. It is directly relevant to the quality of the investigation being conducted under his leadership. The Pima County Deputies Organization, representing more than 300 members of his own department, voted unanimously to pass a no-confidence motion and called for his immediate resignation. Not a split vote, not a majority, unanimous. And then the Pima County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to compel Nanos to answer questions under oath using a territorial-era statute that creates a legal pathway to his removal from office. His own county government no longer trusts his word without legal consequences attached to it. The Arizona Republic reported that Nanos resigned from the El Paso Police Department in 1982. 2 years earlier than listed on his public resume, to avoid termination over disciplinary issues, including excessive force and insubordination. The discrepancy was attributed by the Sheriff's Department to clerical errors. Carmona also addressed the decision to send physical evidence from this case to a private lab in Florida rather than to the FBI for analysis. He noted that federal forensic services are provided to local law enforcement agencies at no charge. There is no cost justification for bypassing the FBI lab in a case where the FBI is one of the lead investigating agencies. That decision creates the kind of institutional inconsistency, evidence chains that cross jurisdictions, labs, and protocols that defense attorneys are specifically trained to exploit. When you hold all of that together, a unanimously no-confidence sheriff, a board moving to compel testimony under oath, a former U.S. Surgeon General calling the crime scene corrupted, evidence sent to a private lab instead of Quantico, the first responders who arrived to a scene the family had been in for nearly an hour. What you have is not a normal investigative environment. You have an investigation conducting itself under conditions of institutional fragmentation, and institutional fragmentation leaves gaps. Gaps in evidence chains, gaps in protocol, gaps in the kind of meticulous documentation that makes prosecutions survive courtroom challenges. And in a case that already has a compromised crime scene and a closed-glove DNA thread, those gaps are not recoverable. What is still working in this investigation deserves to be stated clearly because this case is not over. The FBI brought in the Golden State Killer after 40 years using genetic genealogy. That same methodology is active on the mixed DNA profile from inside Nancy's home. The suspect on the doorbell camera is a real person. A man with a specific height, a specific build, a specific backpack that was sold exclusively at Walmart, a specific holster position that analysts have flagged as a behavioral signature. He exists. He walked onto that porch. He has a name somewhere. And the genetic genealogy does not need the crime scene to be pristine to build a family tree from a DNA sample. It needs time and a laboratory and one distant relative who submitted their DNA to a consumer service without ever imagining this moment. The cell tower data from January 23rd, the night of the dress rehearsal, is still in investigators' possession. That was the night the suspect believed was invisible. The night the backward walker tested the Ring camera sensor lag at a house 6.5 miles from Nancy's home. The night he almost certainly did not take the same precautions he would take 9 days later. His phone was probably in his pocket. He probably drove his own car. That data does not expire. It does not degrade. It is a record that exists on servers, and it is being cross-referenced against February 1st by investigators who know exactly what they are looking for. The Uber dash cam footage from Nancy's 5:32 p.m. ride on January 31st has been obtained and is being analyzed frame by frame. The route she traveled, the vehicles around her Uber, the streets between her home and Annie's house on the last evening of her freedom. Whatever was near that Uber is in that footage. And the camera outage map, the FBI's documentation of which cameras went dark on the night of the abduction and in which direction they were facing, is building a device footprint that will eventually place whoever was operating that equipment at a specific location on a specific street at a specific time. The investigation is not finished. The science is running. But it is running inside an institutional structure that a former U.S. Surgeon General just described as compromised at its foundation. And the question of whether it can produce a prosecution-ready result despite that compromised foundation is the question 69 days of silence has not answered. Here is what the confirmed record shows on day 69. A real suspect on camera who has not been identified. And a pacemaker timestamp at 2:28 in the morning that is the cleanest forensic anchor in the entire case. An unidentified vehicle captured 6 minutes after that timestamp 2.5 miles away. A glove DNA lead that spent weeks as the most watched thread in this investigation and came back to a restaurant worker with no connection to the case. A mixed DNA profile from inside the home that has produced no name from any database. A crime scene that the 17th Surgeon General of the United States called permanently corrupted on national television. A lead sheriff whose own department voted unanimously against him and whose county board is moving to compel him under oath. Evidence sent to a private lab in Florida instead of the FBI. A family that arrived at the crime scene up to an hour before law enforcement. A ransom framework named by a family member before any note existed. And 69 days of institutional silence from a department that is simultaneously facing the deepest credibility crisis in its recent history. That is the full picture. Not filtered through optimism. Not filtered through the ransom framework. Not filtered through the sheriff's press conferences or the family's public statements. The confirmed record on day 69. Carmona said it clearly. When you have a sheriff that has to keep correcting himself and changing his story every day, the public loses faith in you. You cannot lead without trust. And a case this serious cannot be solved without leadership that the people working under it actually trust. Every detective, every forensic analyst, and every federal agent sharing intelligence with a department whose leader they have unanimously declared incompetent is doing so inside an environment where the credibility of every decision is in question. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has been missing for 69 days. Her family cannot grieve. The glove lead is closed, the crime scene is gone, and the man who called it gone is the same man who once ran the department that lost it. The DNA is still running. The genealogy is still building. The cell towers still hold data that nobody has made public. And somewhere between the first phone call on February 1st and the testimony that a county board is now trying to compel under oath, the answer to what happened to Nancy Guthrie is waiting to be reached by an investigation that has the science but may not have the institutional integrity to deliver it cleanly when the science finally speaks. Share this video for Nancy. Not for this channel. Every share keeps this case in front of someone who might know something. Every like tells the algorithm this story still matters. Subscribe so the next update reaches you the moment it breaks. Because the suspect in this case is counting on the world moving on. And the investigation that is supposed to find them is being led by a man whose own county just voted to put him under oath. After everything in this video, the corrupted crime scene, the closed glove DNA, the institutional collapse, the former Surgeon General going on camera, what do you think is actually left of this investigation? And do you believe that what remains is enough to get to an arrest? Because this community has been asking the right questions from the beginning, and right now the right question is the only thing keeping the pressure on.